Hello and welcome to the new season of the Drawn and Redrawn, the Making of India's Internal Boundaries podcast. This is a part of a larger India State Stories project that explores the evolution of India's political and administrative boundaries. This project is an undertaking by the Centre for Legislative Education and Research at Flame University in Pune. In this new season, we embark on a journey through the fascinating histories and narratives of each Indian state and union territories, exploring the pivotal events, influential personalities, and societal transformations that have shaped the subcontinent. In the 21st episode, we learn about the history behind the formation of Mizoram state. This episode is based on a corresponding article written by our team at India State Stories. These articles have been converted to audio conversations with the help of Google's Notebook LM. You can find the relevant article link in the show notes. Now, let's dive into the conversation.
So today we are heading to the Northeast, specifically to a region that's it's defined by these steep rolling hills and a history that is honestly unlike anything else in the country. We're talking about Mizoram. And usually when we look at how Indian states are formed, we're looking at language disputes or princely states merging or these big political treaties.
Standard templates.
Exactly. But looking at the research for this one, the catalyst here is it's completely different. It's not a treaty. It's not a language. It's a flower.
A flower and a rat.
A flower and a rat.
Yeah.
It sounds like the setup for a fable or some kind of nursery rhyme, but this is actual hard history.
Oh, it is. It's this fascinating case study where a cyclical ecological event, something purely biological, kicks off a famine, which then triggers a social movement, which, turns into an armed revolution and then finally results in the birth of a new state.
That is just a wild domino effect. But okay, before we get to the biology, we really need to understand the geography and the people. Because looking at the early maps, this wasn't called Mizoram initially. It was the Lushai Hills.
Correct. And that name change from Lushai to Mizo is really, you could say, the central mission of this deep dive. We're not just talking about borders changing on a map.
Yeah.
We're tracing the evolution of a people. We're looking at how a collection of distinct tribal chieftainships transform into a single unified political identity.
Okay, so let's start at the very beginning. If we go back before independence, before 1947, what is happening in the Lushai Hills? How does it operate?
Administratively, it was designated as the Lushai Hills District way back in 1898 under the British. But if you were living there, the British administration might have felt very, very distant.
Right.
The real power on the ground, the day-to-day power, lay with the tribal chiefs.
The chiefs? And who were they exactly?
These were hereditary leaders from various clans, the Lushai, the Chin, the Kuki, the Hmar, among others. And they held immense sway over the entire socio-political landscape. They controlled the land, they settled disputes. They essentially ran the society.
So the British are technically in charge, but they're kind of letting the chiefs run the show.
It was a very deliberate strategy. And this brings us to a massive piece of legislation that really set the stage for everything that followed. The Government of India Act of 1935.
I feel like that act pops up in almost every discussion we have about pre-independence history. What did it do here specifically?
It classified the Lushai Hills as an excluded area.
Excluded area. That terminology feels very specific. Excluded from what?
Excluded from the direct administrative laws of British India. It meant that the laws being passed in Delhi or Calcutta didn't automatically apply there. The British wanted to, limit Indian administrative influence and preserve the authority of those tribal chiefs.
Why would they want to do that?
To keep the region stable and, frankly, to keep it isolated. It sort of functioned like a political time capsule. While the rest of India was getting deep into the freedom struggle, debating democracy.
Right, holding elections.
Exactly. The Lushai Hills were kept in this kind of feudal bubble ruled by chiefs, completely cut off from that democratization process.
That sounds like a pressure cooker just waiting to explode. You can't keep people in a bubble forever, especially when the world is changing so fast.
Precisely. And the bubble started to crack right after World War II, around 1946. You see the emergence of a whole new class of elites in the region.
Who were they? Younger chiefs or?
No, and that's the key. They were commoners. This period saw a massive surge in Christian missionary activity, and with it, education.
Yeah.
So you suddenly had a generation of young, educated Mizos who weren't part of the royal lineage.
I see.
But they were smart, they were aware of the world, and they were very, very unhappy with the status quo.
Because they had no real path to power under the chiefs, right?
Right. They viewed the whole chieftainship system as archaic, as oppressive. They wanted democracy. So in 1946, they formed the Mizo Union, or the MU.
And what was their platform?
Their primary platform was incredibly radical for the time. They advocated for the complete abolition of chieftainship.
So even before India becomes independent, you have this internal civil struggle happening, this new democratic force versus the old feudal guard.
That's it, exactly. And when India does gain independence in 1947, the central government has to figure out, okay, what do we do with this excluded area? They can't just leave it as is.
How do they bridge that gap?
Well, they established the Bordeloi Committee. And this committee recommended something called the Sixth Schedule of the Constitution.
We hear about the Sixth Schedule a lot when we talk about the Northeast, but what does it actually do in practice? Why was it such a big deal?
It was a pretty revolutionary experiment in Indian democracy, actually. The government realized they couldn't just impose standard Indian law on these really unique tribal societies.
It wouldn't fit.
Not at all. So the Sixth Schedule was a compromise. It granted the Lushai Hills and other tribal areas a significant amount of constitutional autonomy.
Autonomy in what sense?
Real, tangible governance. They got control over their land, forest management, town councils, property inheritance. It was a way of saying, you are part of India, but we acknowledge that your customary laws and way of life are distinct, and we will protect that.
That seems like a pretty progressive move for a nation that was just born.
It was. But there was still the issue of identity. Remember, the place was still called the Lushai Hills.
Right. And as you mentioned, Lushai is just one of several tribes.
Correct. And that became a friction point. If you were a Mara or a Lai, why would you want to live in a district named after the Lushai? So in 1954, the government officially changed the name to the Mizo Hills.
Okay, so is Mizo just a different word for the same thing?
No, and this is absolutely crucial. Mizo is an umbrella term. It's inclusive. It was a conscious political shift to bring all those kindred tribes, the Hmar, the Lai, the Mara, the Lushai, under one banner.
So by changing the name, they were basically creating a unified Mizo nationhood out of these disparate clans.
Exactly. It's a powerful bit of branding. It consolidated their political leverage, and they used that leverage almost immediately. That same year, 1954, they passed the Assam Lushai Hills District Act.
Which did what?
It did exactly what the Mizo Union had been fighting for since '46. It abolished chieftainship. The government bought out the chiefs' rights to the land. The feudal system was, with the stroke of a pen, legally dismantled.
Wow. So within just a few years of independence, they've united under a new name and overthrown their traditional rulers. They must have felt pretty good about their position.
They did feel empowered. In fact, there was a Hill States movement in the early 50s where they pushed for a separate state entirely, but the States Reorganization Commission in 1956 shut that down.
Right.
They felt the region was too small, too internally divided and just not economically viable to be its own state.
So they were stuck as a district within the state of Assam.
Yes.
Yeah.
And while there was some grumbling, it was relatively peaceful for a few years, but then nature intervened.
The bamboo?
The bamboo.
Okay, walk us through this. How does a plant cause a political crisis?
It's this incredible phenomenon known as Mautam. The region is covered in a specific species of bamboo called Melicana basifera. And this bamboo has a fascinating but frankly terrifying life cycle. Every 48 to 50 years, it flowers gregariously. That means all the bamboo across thousands of square miles flowers at the exact same time.
Which sounds beautiful, theoretically.
Visually, maybe, but ecologically, it's a complete catastrophe. These flowers produce millions and millions of protein-rich seeds, and there's an animal in the forest that absolutely loves these seeds.
The rat.
The rat. The rats get this endless buffet, and their population explodes exponentially. We are talking about millions of rats appearing almost overnight.
Oh, my God.
And once they finish the bamboo seeds, they don't just, stop eating. They swarm out of the forests and into the fields. They devour the rice, the standing crops, the granaries. They eat everything.
That is a horrifying image, a literal plague of rats.
It is. And this hit in 1959. It's known as the Mautam famine.
Now, surely the people living there knew this was coming. If it happens every 50 years, the elders must have remembered the last one.
They absolutely did. The local elders warned the Assam government. They told them, the bamboo is flowering, the rats are coming, we need to stockpile rice now.
What did the Assam government do?
They dismissed it. They called it tribal superstition. They genuinely didn't believe that bamboo flowers could possibly cause a famine.
So when the famine hit,
There was no preparation. Relief was incredibly slow and totally insufficient.
that must have felt like such a betrayal. You're starving, your crops are gone, and the government that is supposed to protect you, which is sitting far away in Assam, basically told you you were being superstitious.
That is the pivotal moment. Hunger breeds anger, and that anger needed an organization. A group was formed called the Anti-Famine Campaign Organization.
Okay.
Initially, their mission was purely humanitarian, to feed the people because the state had failed them.
But I'm guessing it didn't stay humanitarian for long.
No. It radicalized, and it radicalized rapidly. This organization morphed into the Mizo National Front, the MNF, and their argument was simple and devastatingly effective. If the government of India cannot save us from the rats, why should we be part of India?
That is a massive leap in logic, but emotionally?
Yeah.
You can completely see how they got there. It delegitimized the entire government structure.
Exactly. The MNF, led by a man named Laldenga, gained immense popularity because they were the ones on the ground helping people when the government wasn't. And they started to argue that the Mizo people were a separate nation and deserved a separate sovereign state.
And this wasn't just talk. This led to actual war.
It did. The situation just deteriorated over the next few years until 1966. The MNF decided that negotiations were pointless. They launched Operation Jericho.
That sounds like a full military operation.
It was. On March 1st, 1966, the MNF declared independence from India. They launched coordinated attacks across the district, targeting government treasuries, security posts, communication lines.
They tried to take over.
They essentially tried to overrun the entire region in a single night. And they were successful initially. They took control of large parts of Azal, the capital, and other key towns. They effectively severed the region from the rest of India.
The Indian government could not have taken that lightly. What was the response?
It was swift, and it was severe. Mizoram was declared a disturbed area under the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, AFSPA. The army was mobilized to retake the territory. But there is one specific event during this counteroffensive that stands out.
I think I know what you're referring to. The airstrikes.
Yes, the bombing of Azal.
It's just... It's really hard to wrap your head around that. The idea of your own country's air force dropping bombs on its own territory, on its own citizens.
It's a heavy, dark chapter. As the MNF held the town, the Indian Air Force was called in to dislodge them. And historical records indicate this is the only time the Indian Air Force has conducted airstrikes within Indian territory against its own people.
The psychological impact of that, I mean, it must have been devastating.
It was traumatic. It caused widespread destruction of homes and property. Civilians fled into the hills, and it created this deep sense of alienation and fear that lasted for generations. It turned a political dispute into a deep, bloody wound.
So the MNF retreats into the jungles after this.
Yes, they retreated into the dense forests and across the borders into what was then East Pakistan and Myanmar. And this kicked off 2 decades of insurgency, ambushes, counterinsurgency operations, curfews. Life in Mizoram was defined by conflict.
That seems like an impossible situation to resolve. You have a separatist army, a traumatized population, and a government that used heavy military force. How do you even begin to fix that?
Oh, it didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, painful process of rebuilding trust. The first real olive branch came in 1971. Under the Northeastern Areas Reorganization Act, Mizoram was upgraded from a district to a union territory.
Meaning they were no longer part of Assam.
Exactly. They answered directly to New Delhi. It was a big step toward the autonomy they wanted, but it wasn't full statehood, and it certainly didn't end the fighting immediately.
So what finally broke the deadlock?
Exhaustion on both sides and a lot of political will. Negotiations dragged on for years. Finally, in 1986, there was a breakthrough. The Mizoram Accord was signed.
I've seen this referred to as one of the most successful peace accords in modern Indian history. Why? What made this one work when so many others fail?
It was a genuine compromise. The terms were very clear. The MNF agreed to lay down their arms, come out of the jungle, and operate within the framework of the Indian Constitution. They dropped the demand for independence.
And in exchange?
The government granted Mizoram full statehood, not just a union territory, but a full state with all the powers that come with it. They also promised special protections for Mizo customs and land, and crucially, they granted amnesty.
Amnesty for all the fighters.
Yes, and this is the most incredible part of the story. Lal Denga, the man who declared independence, the man who led the war against the state for 20 years, he came back, formed a political party, and won the election. He became the chief minister of Mizoram.
Wait, hold on. The rebel leader became the chief minister. That is an unbelievable turn of events.
It's incredible. It signifies the amazing flexibility of the Indian federal structure. It showed that the system could absorb even its most violent dissenters if they were willing to work within the democratic framework.
So on August 14th, 1986, the State of Mizoram Act is passed, and they officially become the 23rd state of India.
Correct. The map was finally peacefully redrawn.
But speaking of maps, I was looking at the source material, and the internal lines kept changing even after they became a state.
They did because, governance is never static. When Mizoram started, it had 3 massive districts, Aizawl in the north, Longlai in the middle, and Chimtupui way down in the south.
And today?
Today, there are 11 districts.
Why keep slicing it up? Is it just bureaucracy?
No, it's about access. You have to remember the terrain. These are steep, difficult hills. If you live in a remote village, getting to the district headquarters in Aizawl could take days. By creating smaller districts like Mamit, Kolasib, and Champhai, you are literally bringing the government closer to the people.
It sounds like it also goes back to that idea of localized identity we talked about at the beginning.
Absolutely. Even within the broader Mizo identity, there are still local nuances. Creating these districts is a way of recognizing those local communities and ensuring they feel represented. It's a continuous process of refining democracy.
It really is a complete transformation. I mean, if we just look back at the arc of this story.
It's quite a journey. We started with the excluded area under the British where chiefs ruled and commoners had no say.
Then the rise of the Mizo Union and the fight for democracy, quickly followed by the devastation of the bamboo famine.
Which then triggered the rise of the MNF, the Declaration of Independence, and the absolute tragedy of the 1966 conflict.
And finally, the wisdom on both sides to sit down, sign the accord, and build a state that is, by all accounts, remarkably peaceful today.
It's a story of resilience, really. The boundaries of Mizoram aren't just lines drawn by a surveyor. They are the result of people fighting for their survival, first against a feudal system, then against a famine, and finally for their political rights.
And I just can't stop thinking about the bamboo. It really challenges the way we look at history. We focus on great men and big laws, but here, a biological clock ticking inside a plant forced the hand of an entire nation.
It's a powerful reminder. I mean, if that bamboo hadn't flowered in 1959, if the rats hadn't swarmed, does Mizoram exist as a state today, or is it still just a district in Assam?
Like a huge what if.
The demand for autonomy was always there, simmering. But the famine was the spark. It exposed a gap in governance so wide that the only way to close it was to redraw the map entirely. It proves that nature and politics are so much more intertwined than we like to admit.
A flower blooms, a government fails, and a new state is born. What a story. Well, that is all the time we have for this deep dive. If you want to see the evolution of these maps or read more about the specifics of the Mautam famine and the peace accord, please do check the show notes for the link to the India State Stories article.
It is definitely worth a read to see all the details we couldn't cover here.
Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next deep dive into India's borders. Goodbye.